alongside colleagues at Cambridge University Health Partners and the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. And all these events so far have been in person at the Cambridge Biomedical Campus, and they're for people with an interest in innovation to share experiences, knowledge and expertise, and we invite a range of speakers with an aim of connecting people. And we were keen to run this event as online as well, so we can enable colleagues within CPFT to easily attend, because a lot of people are in different locations. We know we've got a range of people today, many from the wider health ecosystem, some innovators, and we welcome you all. So we also especially welcome Professor Paul Fletcher, who I'm now going to introduce you to before his talk. Professor Paul Fletcher is the Bernard Wolfe Professor of Health Neuroscience at the University of Cambridge. He's an honorary consultant psychiatrist within the Cambridge and Peterborough NHS Trust, and he's also a welcome investigator. So Paul trained in medicine, graduating in 1998, and then he specialised in psychiatry. His research career has been motivated by the conviction that psychiatric illness requires a more sophisticated understanding of brain processes, and he's established a body of work elucidating alterations in brain responses across a range of psychiatric illnesses. But his work has continued to be shaped by the fact that comprehensive research programmes must incorporate considerations of social, environmental, cognitive and subjective contributors to psychiatric illness. He's an internationally recognised leader in cognitive neuroscience and functional neuroimaging of psychiatric and other behavioural disorders. Paul has also collaborated with Ninja Theory, so it's the Cambridge-based video games design studio, for 10 years now, and he was part of the BAFTA winning team that created games representing the experience of psychosis. And in this talk, Paul's going to describe the establishment of video games as a medium for representing the huge range of human experience and behaviour that has been accompanied by the advances in their sophistication and realism. So that the cognitive and clinical neurosciences have begun to harness their power to represent and engage players in rich participatory experiences. And we can go beyond this and then also use the power to engage as a way of challenging and measuring players' cognitive traits and abilities. So excitingly, there's also the possibility of incorporating these modalities into the therapeutic process by exploiting their potential for learning and behaviour change. So Paul will describe his recent work using game design within virtual reality as a way of helping people to regulate their physiological responses to stress and thereby to manage experiences of anxiety. So I think that's plenty from me. I'm going to hand over to Paul, and we welcome your talk, Paul, and I hope we'll have lots of interesting discussion as well.
Yeah, thanks very much, Felix. That's a very thorough introduction. I don't think I've ever been so thoroughly introduced. Thank you very much. Thanks also to Lorna and Mariama and Laura for setting this up and really helping me a great deal in preparing. It's great to participate in this. Sorry, I'm just setting my timer. They've asked me to talk for about 25 minutes, so I'll aim to do that. Yeah, so I am very mindful that this is a very diverse audience who joined us, diverse in terms of expertise and experience. And I've tried to shape my talk to reflect that. And in doing so, I'm going to give a broad overview of the things that really excite me about video game design or video games as a tool that we can really harness in psychiatry. There's a huge amount of potential, I think, and we've only just begun to really scratch the surface of that potential. And I hope that in presenting today, I'll get you as excited about video games as I am. There will be some videos, there'll be sounds. I'm sitting on my own in a room here. I might be seeing things on the screen. If when I'm playing these, that they're not visible or you can't hear, perhaps you could put it in the chat so we can remedy it. It's worked well in practice. Many thanks to Lorna and team for that. So as an overview, I want to begin by thinking about video games purely in terms of their capacity to represent mental experiences. With respect to one particular case study, which was my involvement in a couple of video games, and also to then explore how the act of representing actually becomes in itself a therapeutic intervention for some people. And that's something I found very interesting and very gratifying as I worked in this medium. I'll then go on to talk about video gameplay as a tool for measuring and assessing cognition. And then in the third part, I want to talk about some recent work we've been doing, looking at how virtual reality can come together with game design with a particular therapeutic focus and purpose. And in this case, it's helping people to manage anxiety. So to begin with, video games and mental representation. I was very fortunate to, as Felix said, about 10 years ago, to become involved with a video game company based in Cambridge, Ninja Theory. Three key people I've listed here. And they allowed me to become involved in a game called Hellblade, which was a classic exploration, combat, puzzle-based game, but with a big difference in that the main protagonist was a Celtic warrioress, or Celtic warrior, who was experiencing psychotic hallucinations and delusions. And the game was attempting to represent what that might be like in the context of her story. And what really got me deeply involved was their willingness to immediately engage with people with lived experience. We worked closely with Recovery College East, the Wellbeing Hub, and the people that you see there. This was a meeting that we had shortly before the game was released, when we had a full day's playthrough. And throughout, this process was one of collaboration and co-production, which I think was absolutely key to its subsequent impact, which I'll tell you about in a moment. I just want to give you a sort of sense of what they were doing within this game. I've put together some sound clips based upon the recordings they made of actors, and also some video clips. These don't go terribly well together, but they give you a sense of the game. And critically, all of these experiences that were put into the game came from first-person accounts of people who had their own lived experience. So I should warn you that it's a distressing experience to hear the voices, so you may want to turn off your sound if you find it a bit much. So the striking thing about the game is it's a very dark one, and at no point did any of us really feel that this would be commercially terribly successful. I think the ambition was maybe to break even, but it was very much done as a labor of love by the studio. They had personal reasons for wanting to represent psychotic experiences. But surprisingly to all of us, it actually received a lot of critical acclaim. Here's a review in The Guardian, which was, I mean, common across the major online media and print media, was a respect for what had been achieved. And indeed, one thing I liked about the Guardian review was in the first and only time in my career I was referred to as a rampaging Cambridge professor. I doubt that'll happen again. I also had the unique experience that we were nominated for several BAFTAs and won one for the impact of the game. This led to a second development of a second game in which, gratifyingly, the team wanted to go even further with the representation and with the co-production, lived experience involvement. And off the back of the second game, we also had a number of public and online events talking about psychosis from the perspective of representation. We had a panel with people with lived experience, including Emma and Eddie from Recovery College, alongside game designers and psychiatrists. And it's very striking to me, as somebody who's lived within the sort of very, sealed off environment of academia, is that when you get involved with these bigger projects, is that you reach a huge number of people. So hundreds of people joined online. They were talking about it on various social media. Subsequent to the release of the game, there have been BBC involvement. The company created a documentary which was released with the game. And people on YouTube with large follower bases have been discussing the nature of psychosis in a number of very sincere and powerful ways. So it does lead to an impact that I found incredibly striking. And indeed, it's had an impact in the academic forum, with a number of papers being released assessing how it affects people's attitudes towards psychosis. So all of these things were very surprising to me, but perhaps most surprising and really most poignant and gratifying were the personal message that I and the game studio received from people who'd had their own experience of suffering psychosis and non-psychotic mental illnesses, talking about how important it was to be able to represent those experiences to the people that they knew, people who'd never really understood it. And this is where I think representation can be an important part of the process of allowing people to point to things, talk about them, and work through them with people who might not otherwise get a sense of what those experiences are. So now I'm going to turn to the second part, which I explore the use of video games as a potential means of measuring and monitoring cognition. And there are a number of reasons why I'm excited about this. As a cognitive neuroscientist, I've been involved in trying to develop tests for how people process and make decisions about and learn about the world and their environment. And we're often doing so in a very, very rudimentary, unsatisfying way, using either paper and pencil tasks or flat screen computer tasks that are not terribly engaging. But cognitive tests, in order to really reflect how well or how people do process information, they really should be engaging. They should be immersive. They should be purposeful to people. It shouldn't be just about responding to different colored squares on a screen. There should be some purpose to it. Otherwise, a number of people will just not engage and will not be able to, or the measures we get will not really reflect their true capacities cognitively. So I think we need to harness the potential of games to provide powerful ways to increase and optimize these features of engagement, immersion, repetition, and learning. And it's certainly true that major advances in the quality and graphics in video games and in virtual reality are, I think, providing a bridge between the laboratory or clinic and the real world, and allowing us to make tasks that are more engaging, that have more purpose and meaning. And one thing I've been involved with recently that I've been very excited about, collaborating with the people you see mentioned here, is developing our own game in which we are taking the game narrative and the game world and embedding the tasks within that in an integrated way so that the tasks have purpose in the context of the overall narrative of the game story. I don't want to go into details. This is something that we're still working on. But the basic idea is that you are working as a research assistant within a sort of naturalistic camp in which you have a number of tasks over the course of a 3-day experience, or three days within the game world. And within that camp, you're doing simple, basic reaction time tasks and other types of things. But those reaction time tasks are not just being presented in and of themselves. They have a purpose. So, for example, using your reactions to reset the this machine here, this analytical machine, you do in order to collect samples from the nearby biome and to test those samples for any toxic chemicals. And over the course of the game, you begin to learn that all is not quite as it seems, and there are toxins in the soil and in the ice that suggest that the company you're working for aren't entirely above board. And so as the narrative develops, you have to solve further puzzles, all of which are classic cognitive tasks. But these puzzles allow you to progress through the game. So, for example, the little GIF that you see at the bottom is a simple digit span memory task. But in this case, that solves a code that allows you to get through a gate. So integrating all of these things within a narrative might allow us to test cognition in a more enjoyable, immersive, and naturalistic way that allows people to process information in ways that are meaningful to them. Also, video games give us an output that is much richer than you typically get from cognitive tasks, where you get some reaction times and accuracy. Here we can actually chart the progress of the participant as they navigate through the environment. We can look at what interests them, the places where they linger. We can look at whether they get lost, how they get out of that. So there's all sorts of rich variables that we can then test in order to get a much richer fingerprint of their behavior when they're confronted with these challenges and puzzles and tasks. Something I'm very excited about, and it's been a huge privilege to work with CAM IDE and particularly Julian and Harley, who've been designing and building this game in ways that I couldn't have imagined. It's led largely by my PhD student, Millie Priest, and we've had very powerful lived experience involvement from Vanessa Bennett and Francoise Marcus. We also have a very helpful collaboration with Microsoft Research in the form of Ida Mamenejad, who has been fantastic in terms of computational analysis of the data. So I'm very excited. This game is still in development. We hope to have a playable version within the next couple of months, and then to explore just how far we can take it in terms of disseminating it to people and asking them to play through it. So in the final part, the last 10 minutes of this presentation, I want to move into a different realm and think about how we might be able to exploit combining virtual reality and game design with a particular goal in mind. And in this case, it's as a sort of adjunctive approach to helping people manage anxiety, not just clinical anxiety, but general anxiety that any and all of us might feel at some time. And it's based on some fairly simple principles that are not terribly original, but what is, I think, unique is being able to use virtual reality approaches in order to bring these sort of therapeutic aspirations to life in a much more immersive way. This is something that we've done in very close collaboration with Ninja Theory, who although their primary role is to make commercial games, have been incredibly generous in helping to support and provide a huge amount of expertise and technical support in this project. And we refer to it, as I said, as the Insight Project. So as a brief background, the simple theoretical framework on this is that we know that signals from our body shape how we respond to the external world. We all know that when we're in a state of hunger, certain types of stimulus become much more attractive. When we're full, they become less attractive. We know that our body affects our brain. And one way in which it does that very powerfully is in a state of stress or anxiety. So tension in our muscles, increasing heart rate, feelings of tightness in our chest, butterflies in our stomach. Those are all core components of how we will then process the external world, because it makes us more vigilant. We look for danger. But at the same time, the world around us and our response to it will shape how those bodily signals affect us. So there's a very big difference between the sorts of anticipatory fear and anxiety that you get with something like flying, if you're scared of it, as opposed to people who climb onto a roller coaster and they get similar physical sensations, but they do it for enjoyment. So the environment that we're in and how we process it will determine how that body and brain signaling is integrated. Now, this gives us key therapeutic insight, because if we can learn to manage our bodily responses and reframe our appraisal of the world, then we can change our mental experiences. As I say, this is not a terribly original idea, but it is something where I think applying virtual reality in games can give us a huge amount of potential. And this is work that's been led by a number of very clever people: Ben Cook, Lucy Daniel Watanabe, Grace Lung, Naresh Subramaniam, and Andy Brendler have been working on it, particularly in recent months. So the Insight project has 4 pillars or themes to its overall approach. The first one, I've been fortunate enough, through absolutely no merit of my own, to have established, because it involves collaborating with a game company who really have an active interest in promoting well-being, and Ninja Theory really fit that bill. The second aim is to enhance lab-based stress induction and measurement using virtual reality experiences, and I'll just explain why I think that's important. We need to be able to induce stress in people experimentally in a way that's convenient, consistent, and obviously ethical. Because we need to be able to characterize how different people respond to stresses and thereby understand stress experiences more fully. It's also the case that many anxiety management techniques are taught in non-stress settings, whether in the clinic or in some other setting. It's often the case that when people practice, they're not under stress, but actually we want them to practice when they are under stress, because that's the best way to prove to people that these techniques can work, and also to allow them to become comfortable with using these techniques when it might feel difficult. So we created a range of virtual reality stressors. I won't go into details now, there's not the time, but the idea is that people put the virtual reality headset on and we choose a stressor, and they spend 5 minutes under those circumstances. So one example that the game company created for us involves spiders. So those of you who are as arachnophobic as I am might want to look away. So you find yourself in a little corridor surrounded by baby spiders, and then after a short while, mummy spider comes out and looms above you. This is, for me, a deeply, I've experienced this many times in VR, and each time my heart rate goes up by 10 or 15 beats a minute. So the aim, we're not just doing this for the sake of it. We want to use our VR-based stress induction techniques to characterize physiological and psychological responses. We want to characterize what the body is doing and what the mind is doing in response. So we collect physiological and psychological responses during the stress experiences. As you can see, it can all be conveniently done within a small space. This actually is our space at Douglas House, which CPFT have very kindly made available for us to work on this project. And the idea is that the person is hooked up to a number of measures, and we can look at their galvanic skin response, their respiration, their heart rate variability, and various other measures while they're undergoing these VR stressors. We can also look at subjective ratings. This is work from Ben Cook, showing increases in subjective experience of stress as a consequence of the VR. So having done all that and put together all of these measures in order to try and create our best sort of marker for stress, The idea is to use the output of these first three aims to create what's called a biofeedback game to help people with stress, regulation, and anxiety control. And what we have is a prototype. The first thing we need to do in biofeedback is to teach people to self-regulate by presenting back to them their physiological responses as they happen. So by focusing on those responses, perhaps within the context of the game, and by trying to learn to regulate or manage them, what they're actually learning to do is regulate their stress responses and thereby their anxiety. Now, we have a number of different ways of presenting physiological responses back to people. We can have a little figurative representation of their heart beating, or we can present it graphically, which is what some people prefer, or we can present it numerically. But we can go further than that, particularly with a very creative design studio. So we can give abstract representation of the pulsations of the heart, and these filaments represent their inhalation and exhalation. And it's very interesting to sit in VR and just watch this animated representation of what's going on in your body. It's very strangely relaxing, actually. We can also represent it in a more sort of figurative way. In this case, your heart rate is being plugged into the mechanics of the ocean, so that the faster your heart is beating, the more turbulent the water is. So there are all sorts of ways we can do this. And out of this, we've created a two-part VR biofeedback game aiming towards stress regulation. In the first part, people practice breath control, slow-paced breathing, at differing rates depending upon the person in question. And that goes on for 5 minutes. And then we put them into a high-stress situation, which I'll tell you about in a second. And they have to use the breath control in order to control their physiological regulation in order to survive within that stress. So I'm just going to play this to you. This is one of the examples of the breath regulation training. It just lasts a minute or so, but you get a sense of this very pleasant, relaxing experience. So that's the nice bit of the experiment, and you can do that for as long as you want, really. I spent an hour in there one day and came out a different man. So the stressful part is about using that technique, but in a much more horrible situation. Now, this is just a prototype. We wouldn't use this clinically, but it was a way of testing people's capacity to do this. So the idea is you're locked in a dungeon with a dangerous creature. It can detect your heartbeat, it can detect your fear. So what you need to do is keep your heartbeat low. So just a warning, I'm going to present a couple of slides with that dungeon. I won't present much of it, but essentially you're in the dungeon. You have a little readout that's attached to your headset. You can see the green light is on, suggesting your heart rate is safe. But as the creature approaches, you try and keep it as low as you can. There it's gone up to amber in this participant. If it goes to red, then you're in deep trouble because the creature has now detected you. Anyhow, just don't have time to go into further detail, but we've done a feasibility study asking, can healthy people use their slow-paced breathing during that stressful VR experience? And also, does training actually improve it compared to if a group who haven't had this breath training? This has been published, but I'll just very briefly summarize the results. So people are able to use breath training experience as a basis for controlling their responses. People who have undergone the breath training show a greater ability to do so. And indeed, my PhD student, Grace Lung, has shown that actually coming out of this, people have a very different attitude to whether they can control their anxiety. In other words, going through the process gives them a sense that actually prior to what, compared to what they thought previous to this, actually they can have some agency in controlling their anxiety. So I'll draw it to a close there. Our future plans, this is at an early stage, but we want to devise gameplay experiences suitable for people, including children with clinically significant anxiety. We want to work on the breath training program at different rates of inhalation and exhalation. So that's going to involve a lot of thought and experimentation. And importantly, we're going to make these experiences freely available on an existing global digital distribution platform so that experimenters and clinicians and anyone really can download it and have these experiences. The game company have created a really beautiful interface for us that allows you to select an experience and essentially have it as long as you want or as many times as you want. So thank you very much for listening. I've gone 2 minutes over, so my apologies for that. I'm going to stop now so that we can maybe have a discussion. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Paul. And yeah, thank you so much for all the really interesting and exciting kind of ideas and that you shared there. Yeah, so we've got until 15:15 for some questions.
Shall I unshare my screen?
Yes, please. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. So if you'd like to ask a question, please pop your hand up in the chat, or you can put it in the chat in the sort of the box at the bottom, and I'll raise that for you.
Sorry, I can't seem to unshare it. So if anyone can,
okay,
sorry,
maybe one of the people helping host can sort of unshare that for us.
I've done it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I guess to start us off, Paul, I might ask you a question. There's for kind of clinicians who are here, do you have any suggestions for sort of how people might get involved in innovation, sort of forging the links that you have with the companies? Because it sounds like a really exciting collaboration.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one because every time I reflect on this, I realize that there was nothing clever or sensible I did to allow this collaboration to happen and grow, apart from the fact that I was just hugely enthusiastic about it. But it was pure luck that they contacted me. There were lots of people they could have contacted in the first place. So I seized the opportunity. And I have explored a few opportunities in the past that haven't really amounted to anything. So I suppose one thing I would suggest is make the time to be fairly open-minded. If you get any opportunity to have discussions with people, just explore them and see how it feels to you. But I don't really have any blinding insights into how you can proactively make these things happen. I suppose get out there, give public talks if you can, accept opportunities to do that.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and I suppose this forum is a great place to sort of to try that as well, isn't it? There's lots of people from different backgrounds here, so a really lovely space to do that, and as you say, sort of get out there and sort of share ideas. I've got somebody with their hand up, so if as you have a question, if you could switch your camera on, that'd be brilliant. Yeah, thank you. So we've got S. Ray.
Yeah, hi Paul. Fantastic presentation as always, and although some bits I knew, there were bits I didn't know, so it was really interesting. My question is obviously people have to do the piece before they see the stimulus, the anxiety provoking stimulus, to reduce their control their breathing a bit and reduce their heart rate. Is there an optimum time that people need to do that for in order to successfully look, to successfully manage their anxiety when they are then, faced with the dungeon or whatever it might be? I mean, is there an optimum time? How long do you have to do that for to then have likelihood of success? Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense, and actually, it's the short answer to that is we don't know, but we are in a position to start to find out. But there are two aspects to this that I think are interesting. One is that in sitting in that boat, which is a very pleasant experience, actually, you are learning a strategy. You are relaxing yourself if you follow the breathing, but you're also learning a strategy that you can use later. So on the one hand, the way we've set up the experiment is that we're putting people into a state of relaxation before they enter the dungeon. And the question is, how long, could that just last throughout the experience? In which case, how long would they need to be in the boat before they've got enough, if you like, relaxation capital to see them through the dungeon? But the other thing is, and what we were probably focusing on more in that experiment was, can they learn the technique that they then apply? So it doesn't matter how relaxed they are when they go into the dungeon. Can they then apply the technique in order to maintain a state of relaxation? And that was what we tested. But I mean, that still raises a further question, which is, how much practice would somebody want? Should they do it every day? My feeling is that if we can make these experiences sufficiently immersive, that actually I can imagine a situation in which I sat down for 10 minutes every morning with the headset on and just enjoyed being in the boat, because it is actually a pleasant experience. So might it become just a part of your routine where at certain points in the day, you simply climb into the boat and spend 10 minutes actually doing, a healthy breathing technique. There's all sorts of,
I would like that, being in a boat every day in between meetings.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, because that just interested me, because I had to go briefly at it, but I just wondered how long you'd need to really be relaxed enough to be able to use that skill that you developed in the next bit.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know. And, I think there probably are experts out there who have been training people in breathing techniques that we should be bringing on board and asking, for their expertise.
Thank you.
Great. Oh, thank you very much for the questions. We've got some questions coming through in the chat. I've got a question from Netta Tyler, who asks whether you were a gamer before you got involved in this work.
I was, yeah. I mean, when I was, I remember at school we used to sneak out at lunchtime, and the pub nearby had Space Invaders, and we'd feed our 10p pieces into it, which shows how old I am. And subsequently, I've always been fascinated by what games can do, how they can draw you in and create this narrative and choice and experience in a whole world. I went through a period where it was just too time consuming as a junior doctor, where I just simply didn't have the time. But then I came back to it, and latterly I've got back into playing games more.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks. Next question was about whether there's any. This is from Gabrielle Gadsby. So people do want to sort of ask questions. I'm happy for them to do that. Otherwise, I'll read them out. Just asking whether there's any thoughts to expand the technology further for other things like anxiety disorders, phobias, and other disorders in general.
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, one of the reasons why I'm so keen to release this on an open platform is so that people with particular questions can adapt these experiences for things that they want to do. Obviously I've been highly reliant on the game company for devising these experiences, and we've been using them in specific ways. But if somebody had an idea about how they could use it for, say, training bodily awareness, I'd be delighted. And if they have sufficient skills to modify the actual code so that they could change the experiences, so much the better.
Yeah, brilliant. There's a sort of follow-up question there from Shrankler Padney, just asking about sort of the technology that's required, because obviously a lot of this is in VR, but whether this is transferable onto other devices like smartphones.
Yes. So all of the experiences that we have also been made as flat screen experiences. So at the moment, you do need a reasonably powerful desktop or laptop in order to run the program. I mean, not an out of the ordinary one, but I can't imagine them. I mean, I imagine it could be possible on smartphones, but I think it should be possible to run them on sort of home PCs, even if you don't have the VR headset. If you have the virtual reality headset, a fairly standard one, which are becoming more widely available and cheaper, then you would have access to all of it. Otherwise, you could run them on the flat screen.
Yeah, brilliant. There's a few questions sort of related here about sort of Netta, Tyler, and Vivek Patel sort of asking about sort of whether ninja theory, is thinking about working in other areas. There's an example here about respiratory respiratory physiology breath work, and sort of, I guess it's looking at wider applications of this particular software, and then I suppose where it might go from there.
Yeah, so Ninja Theory were incredibly generous, as I said. Latterly, they've, it's a tough old world making games commercially, and latterly they've had to really refocus on their commercial game design. They have, however, been kind enough to respond to us when we've had particular experimental goals. So, for example, the breath work. Recently, they created a whole new set of experiences that allow us to titrate the times for inhalation, pause, and exhalation. And we're currently running a study. Ben Cook and Grace Lung are running a study in which we're exploring lots of different combinations of inhaling, pausing, and exhaling, and looking at the impact of that on different people in order to see what optimal breath patterns there might be and how those might differ across individuals. So there's a lot of experimental flexibility within what we've already got.
Yeah, brilliant. We're sort of running out of time now. There's more questions in the chat. I've just got one person who's got their hand up, Madeline Barnes. So perhaps if you want to put your screen on and ask your question, that can be our last one before we finish.
Yeah, so you're a proponent for open access, and you showed some slides earlier from like Twitch chat and YouTube. Is there any consideration to involving creators or sending copies to creators to perhaps increase visibility on this project?
But the other game creators?
Not necessarily game creators, but like online creators, like video. Yeah. Yeah,
so we've been discussing. I mean, I'm very much in the hands of the studio, who are much better at this than I am. I'm not terribly good at knowing the best way to reach a lot of people. But we're having discussions in the studio about when to actually release the build on Steam, and what is the best way of sort of broadcasting that to people so that they can, work with it, talk about it, maybe disseminate it. So there's a lot of interest in that. And, if you have any thoughts, I'd be very delighted to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I know a couple of creators who'd definitely be interested. So
right. I mean, I know, just to you and to other people who've asked questions who we won't get around to, I did put my email up. I'm more than happy to hear from people, and I might be a bit slow responding, but please do feel free to email me. I hope my email's available. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul, and thank you, Madeline, for the questions. Yeah, we've kind of run out of time, but I think there's been so much interest that we've got lots and lots of questions still to explore, and I hope in the community we can sort of explore those together. Thanks again to Professor Paul Fletcher for a really interesting and thought-provoking talk. I've been asked to mention that the next talk in this series will be in person on the Biomedical Campus, and I think Lorna is going to put a slide up. So that's going to be on grounded AI, and discussing, for people who've got an idea, whether they have a business and whether it's investable. So it's a toolkit for founders. So that's the next event. If people want to get sort of in touch with Paul or have any questions for him in the meantime, then you can send those through. So thank you again, and I think we'll finish there. Thank you, Paul.